How you going?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Being on the edge of possibly one of the most famous beaches in the world makes it special. I think the fact that it's salt water is incredible, and I'm not a competitive swimmer, but I'm a very regular swimmer, and I've just been spending a lot of time in chlorinated pools, and it was such a joy to come back to the fresh salt water of that Icebergs pool um, this morning. So I think just the location of it is incredible. The fact that it's salt. Um, I think the building is stunning. There's something about it. When I first walked in, I felt like I was in a 60s movie, and we can talk about the choice of music, but it just felt like it was almost this film set. Um, it's incredible. I was wondering why, when they painted it all white, whether that was sort of an Italian influence or something from Capri. And
Right.
apparently it was because the polar bear compound at Taronga Zoo was painted white. So being the icebergs, they thought that was appropriate. So when they painted all the rocks and bricks in the
Yeah.
30s, that was from that. So yeah, visually stunning there. And then I think just knowing that you've got a ton of history there, which we don't focus on in the film, but the fact that, people have been swimming in those in the natural pool down there for thousands of years, and in the constructed one since 1929. And you just feel it's been a really important place for a very long time for so many people. I guess the connection was I moved up from Melbourne in the early 90s. Um, and my wife and I swam all year round there, and it was quite a warm winter. But coming from Melbourne, we'd never swim in winter in the ocean, and it was just magnificent at Bondi Beach. And we thought, how long has this been going on for? And we saw this structure down the end of the beach, and knowing that it was icebergs, I just assumed that it was sort of a private club that
Yeah.
wasn't open. And it took us about 10 years to realize that it was a public pool. So, I can't believe that I'd had all that time there. And then I started swimming in it far more regularly. But unashamedly, I was more of a seasonal swimmer. I wasn't so keen on the cold water. And then COVID came along, and when everything was closed, we went swimming at the furthest beach in the harbour over at Camp Cove, and I actually discovered how much I loved cold water. And it was from then that I started going back to icebergs all year round. And when I was looking for a film, I'd done some pretty heavy films, from child protection to racism with Adam Goods and the prison system and child abuse, and a trilogy of homeless films. And I was feeling that I needed to do something that was going to be sort of a happy film, a really uplifting one, and that
Yeah.
would bring me much joy as well. And I was down there having coffee with one of the swimmers, Marg Simpson Lee, and I was saying, I'm looking at doing something that is uplifting. And she said, well, is there a story here at this place? And I just suddenly thought about it, and actually not only the visual nature of it, but it's such an incredible community, and that I felt coming out of COVID was what we needed in a film, that to highlight something that places a real value on the importance of community. Because when it was taken away from us, we were suddenly yearning for it, and we're social character creatures, and we need connection. And so that suddenly was the initial hypothesis. Wow, we can try and do something which is this beautiful film, but also showing community. And you mentioned meditative, and that was a very important part of it, that we wanted a film where we were giving audiences permission just to sit and look at the waves. And that's important in so many respects, but especially now in this information age where we're being bombarded the whole time. You still see people down at icebergs looking at their phones, whereas we should all just be looking at the waves. So we thought, well, let's make a film whereby there's time for the audiences just to drift and contemplate and think about their own position in community and literally just look at the waves. Really hard one to answer, because I think the thing for me was I loved the variety of those moods. I'm not a morning person, but we started at 5 o'clock every morning, and just seeing the different colors of the sky, and
Yeah.
that determined the number of the scenes. So we call it the purple tumble turn scene, but there was one that we shot in slow motion
Yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah.
swim at the edge, and that was a purple morning. And we shot the whole film non-traditionally, that if it was a traditional documentary, we would have been looking at the swimmers down one end and whatever. And so we just said, for this whole hour, the light is so beautiful, let's just hold it. And this scene came out of it. So that was magical. That day with the storm, um, that was incredible. We got there and we didn't realize it was going to be quite so big. Over the course of the year, there were two huge storms. One was when we weren't filming, and that one. And that was so spectacular to see. And we did a huge sound mix for that, because just our sort of boom mic didn't record the roar of the ocean. So I'm not sure if you watched it on a computer or on a big screen, but in the cinema, you see audiences just jump when those waves come
It
in.
comes quite
And,
suddenly,
and
doesn't it? It goes from something
yeah,
quite relaxed to just
and
like,
we wanted to crash in, and we built up so much sound in that and put a deep not Mediterranean, Atlantic Ocean blue on it, and that was spectacular. But you have to be there, and we just happened to be there that day, and we were thinking of packing up, and then suddenly this incredible rainbow appeared, and I'd never seen that rainbow from north to south. And that luckily that was there. We captured it, but it was so important for the film too, because we placed that storm about 2/3 of the way through. And what we're finding, because the pool's sort of the central character, people are really falling in love with it. And people are feeling quite anxious about the pool being hit and swamped and damaged like that. And the rainbow was such a metaphorical signal that everything's okay. And in the world at the moment, we have to have hope, and we have to have some little ray of sunshine or some rainbow to give us hope. And so we thought, I mean, the film doesn't have a 3-act structure and it doesn't have a turning point, but that was placed where we traditionally perhaps would have put a turning point in our other documentaries, just to make sure everyone thought, no, everything's okay. Good question. We wanted to do sort of a time capsule of the swimmers and members down there, but we didn't want to have the interviews in the film. So we conducted 100 interviews, and we put them on the film's website, thepoolfilm.au, and we could go into great detail with all the characters there. So there's about 100 hours of interviews of them, really compelling stuff. But from those interviews, it was almost like an audition. We got a sense of who had these interesting sort of elements to their stories. Everyone was interesting, but rather than choosing characters, we chose themes. So some of the things you mentioned that we wanted to have, we wanted to represent mental health and depression and physical health, both in terms of fitness, but also challenges. So with one of the characters, Donna, who's been battling with ovarian cancer, she wanted that story in the film to enable others who may be dealing with something similar to be able to relate to. I think aging was a really important one, having very active swimmers in their mid-80s and 90s.
yeah,
Volunteering, that was another theme. And so we got the two guys who had been there volunteering for over 40 years. So many of these clubs, whether it's swimming clubs, bowling clubs, whatever, they only survive because of volunteers. Meditation was an important element. Routine and friendship. The two friends who meet there at 13 minutes to 7 every morning. That's an important
Yeah.
thing. And if you're part of a squad, or if you've got a commitment like that, that's the sort of thing that gets people out of bed in the morning. So we could have had so many other characters in, but they had, similar sort of themes. So we literally chose them by theme, and which theme seemed to fit the film better rather than someone else. Neil Rogers, who's the coach, he tragically died a few weeks before we launched the film at the Sydney Film Festival. And people would get out. He was such a strong character, an Olympic swimmer, Commonwealth Games gold medalist, and he had such respect. And he was again the reason people would get up in the dark when they knew they were diving into cold water. It takes that sort of and equally just letting each other down. But yeah, I was mighty impressed when I just saw how willingly they got in on some of those really cold mornings, and being in the water without a wetsuit when it's 15 degrees, that takes a bit of stamina and courage. I mean, there are a number of things, but the biggest thing that jumped out was just a common language and story, that it never ceases to amaze me how many hours people can talk about swimming.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at school, we did the same thing with rowing. Both pretty repetitive things, but it's not so much the fact that it's a repetitive thing, it's the fact that that's the common language. And I think that's the key to a community, is finding a group of people where you're really comfortable, not only in your own skin, but you're talking a language that speaks to you. And as we've been showing the film around Australia, we've actually found that the film is really speaking to a much broader group of people than we thought. That we knew it would be much loved by the swimming community, but we've had people coming up. There were a couple of old ladies who came up with tears in their eyes, and they said, "We're not swimmers, but we feel you've just made a film about our book club." And all the conversations are the same. And it was such a beautiful way of describing it, because their conversation is the shared interest around a book. It may be a film club, it may be a group of people that go away on a SwimTrek. The conversation when you get back in the boat would be, wasn't that great? And I found the current, difficult after the first kilometre, or did you see that? Or it was cold this morning. And the first question everyone asks to someone who's got out of the water at Icebergs is, how's the water? Well, every single day, it's basically the same temperature, and it's wet and it's whatever, but it's a really sincere, important question. And, I'm guilty. I now do the same thing. And I think that's where, especially this is sort of at an extreme, and you'd see it with your SwimTreks, is when people are stripped down to their swimsuits, they're perhaps at their most vulnerable, but also perhaps at their most comfortable. One of the things we say is it's the most photographed pool in the world. And it is. And the pool says, look at me. And there's a huge community of influencers and people taking selfies. In many ways, the swimming community down there is the antithesis of that. It's a very grounded group of people who swim and use the pool, who, influencers and Instagrammers are much more concerned about their image and body beautiful. This group of people are much more concerned about, whether they've had a good swim, and whether they're going to get the quiz right on a Saturday morning, and just having a cup of coffee and being part of a group. And a long answer, but that's the richness of that community. And it can be in so many other ways. Cyclists have the same dialogue. People who are part of a book club, part of a movie club, people who go on a SwimTrek. And that's so important, that we find our tribe. It's something we didn't think we were going to be doing, but we're actually going to be building a big campaign with sort of to take to literally every council around Australia, starting with the ones on the coast, because so many ocean pools are under threat of closure. I mean, New South Wales has, I think there are 80 or 90, and at any given time, half of them are closed. And councils aren't cleaning them and they're not maintaining them. And and it's not just the ocean pools, it's pools in general. We were over in Adelaide for the film festival a couple of weeks ago, and the Norwood pool and a variety of others. I mean, the Norwood pool is one of the most beautiful pools that was opened in the 30s, and there's been a merger of three councils, and they're just not putting a value on swimming pools. So we want to get this film into literally every council, every region, amongst all the swim clubs, all the surf lifesaving clubs, to almost use it as a way of highlighting to local government, these are really important things. And it's not just for the physical health, it's for the mental health of the community, and it's a gathering place, and it's so important. And so well, Jack. And if you take away the heart of a community, that the social problems and that come out, and the cost of health and everything goes through the roof. But if you close pools, if you close cinemas, if you close local libraries, dare I say it, even local post offices, you have to have these things where people can meet and chat with people. And it wasn't something we were focusing on enough when we went into the film, but it just jumped out loud and clear for us once we saw exactly the community, about how people value it as their church, as their savior, as their way of keeping themselves alive from depression, as their way of dealing with cancer when they've got even one of the characters who said, "I'm 85, I want to keep swimming competitively for another 10 years."
Yeah.
But he said it's important having the swimming side, but the social side is so important. And what he said to me at that time was, all my friends, or most of my friends, are in nursing homes. And they've got no one to talk to, and they're literally dying. I'm here every day swimming, great for the physical side, but the conversations and the mental stimulation that I'm getting is so important. And it's vital that the government funders see how important these are.